All right, just here to go over the ISEE practice test, section 2 on quantitative reasoning. I'm going to go over the first 15 questions, and I'll do another video on the other questions later. So let's start out with question number 1. So the question is n, and then that little star symbol, equals 4n plus 3. What is the value of 8 star? So essentially what I have is 8 star equals question mark. This is what we call a function. So when I'm dealing with functions, it's all about substitution. Alright, so in this case what I'm going to do is whenever I see n star, essentially when I'm having another number sub in for it, if I have 8 star for, I'm going to plug in 8 wherever I see n. So in this case, what I'll have is 32 plus 3 equals 35. So 4 times 8 plus 3 equals 35. I used PEMDAS, went multiplication first, and then addition, got 35 as my final answer. First one, pretty simple if you know what you're dealing with. Question 2, x minus y equals 3, then which expression is equal to y? So in this case, it's simply what we call literal equations. All right, literal equations is essentially when you do a regular old equation but you can't really solve for a numerical value. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I am going to have x minus y equals 3. And my advice here is to always add a coefficient to make your problem a little bit easier, and this will come up again in a second. So I'm solving for y, so I'm going to isolate my y variable. So I'm going to subtract 1x from both sides, minus 1x. So I have negative 1y is equal to 3 minus 1x. Okay? So in that situation, to solve for y, what I would do is divide by negative 1. Alright? And this is where that adding those ones and negative ones in as coefficients becomes really helpful, because a lot of people will stop when they get to this step. Alright, but you can't really stop. You have to make sure you see this is negative 1 times y, not 1y. So what you do is you divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1, y. Alright, and this is actually the second part where people get messed up. Let's move this to here. They forget to simplify this. So if I have 3 minus 1x over negative 1, what I'm going to have to do is divide everything. So that's going to give me negative 3 plus x. Y is equal to negative 3 plus x. If you have your answer choices in front of you, it doesn't have that answer on it. But it does have y is equal to x minus 3, which is the exact same thing, because this goes here, this goes there. We have y is equal to x minus 3 as our final answer. The third question. This one is always one that challenges people a little bit. So the sum of 1 to 1,000 is x. Then what is the sum from 1 to 198? 1 to 998. All right, before you get started on this question, I'd like to show people a little trick. And that is to make sure you are thinking about these problems with easier questions. So suppose this was the sum of 1 to, let's say, 5. Alright, that means is equal to x. That means I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Right, and then I said the sum of 1, and what is sum of 1 to 3? This is number 1. all right, well, then I have 1, 2, and 3. All right, well, I know all of this together, right? If I add this, add this, add this, add this, that's going to give me x. Well, I know that this and this is in common, this and this is in common, this and this is in common. But what's missing here is 4 and 5. So this is 9 more, all right? From x is 9 more than the sum of 1 to 3. Okay, so this would give me x minus 9 if I want the sum from 1 to 3. All right, let's use that same logic and apply it to this problem. All right, I use that same logic. Let me erase this. All right, the sum of 1 to 1,000 is x in this case. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 dot 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 996 plus 997 plus 998 plus 999 plus 1,000 is equal to x. But I really want to know the sum of 1 to 998. 1 plus 2 plus 3 dot 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 996 plus 997 plus 998. Well, we can see everything from start all the way to 998 is going to be in common. Gone, 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 gone. Right? The only difference between x and the smaller number is that x is going to be 1,999 greater. So if I want to get to the smaller number, I would subtract. So I have x minus 1,999, which was A. Okay, so next problem. Ooh, tough one. The length of a base is increased by 10% and the height is decreased by 20%. What is the percent decrease? So when you're thinking about percents, sometimes it's good to think about them in terms of proportions. Sometimes it's good to think about them in terms of decimals. Now, whenever I see something saying increased by 10%, or the words increased by tend to be keywords, right? That essentially means add 100 to that number. If it says decrease, so essentially what I'm going to do here is first determine whether I want to use proportions or decimals to talk about this percent. In this, I would use decimals. All right. So with this problem, you have 100%, which is going to give me 1, right? Just the same way 50% would give you 0.5, or 20% gives you 0.2. So now, in this case, there's two triangles. There's triangle 1. And there's, make this a little bit bigger because there's a decrease. There's triangle 1 and triangle 2. Okay, so triangle 1 is the original. Okay, the original is going to equal 100% of its value because it's the original thing. The second triangle is where the adjustments are made. So if I'm looking at this, if the length of the base, so this is, and then I know that I'm talking about the area of a triangle. So I have the area is 100%, or in this case, if I have the area of a triangle, area is equal to base times height. And that's 1 half base times height. I don't have to do anything fancy to it. I can write it in terms of decimals if I want. 0.5 base times height. This triangle, where a lot is done to it, is where there are adjustments made. So remember, this is 100% of its value. This triangle is not 100% because there was an adjustment made to it. It's the same thing. The area is equal to 1/2 base times height, but there are adjustments made to it. First, let's make this into a decimal, 0.5. The second thing is there was an adjustment made to this base, and there's an adjustment made to this height. And this is where using decimals is great. So the base was increased by 10%, which means, so I still have the 0.5 from, because it's half times base times height, times the base was increased by 10%. So it's 100%, right? At 100%, just B, and it's increased by 10%. So that's 1.1. So that's because it's 110% now. Base times, well, it was decreased by 20%. If it's decreased by 20%, I have 100% of the value, and I decrease it by 20%. That's going to be 0.8 height. So what I'm going to see is when I multiply all of these together, I have 1.1 times 0.5 times 0.8. And if I get that, that's going to give me 0.44 BH. And you might say to yourself, well, I'm done the problem. But you're really not, because this was originally 0.5 BH. So you have 0.5 BH. And this one is 0.44. Give myself a little space. This is 0.50 BH. This is 0.44 BH. And it asks for the decrease in percent. So what I'm going to do, or if it asks me for the decrease in the area of the triangle, I'm going to get, let's see, looks like I made a mistake somewhere here. It's 0.06 BH. So in my mind, you should have gotten a 6%. Let me just double check my math. All right. I think I made a mistake somewhere, but I can't see where, because I think your answer is supposed to be 12%. Let me go back and check. In the meantime, I'm going to go on to the next problem, but I will come back to this at some point. If not this video, another one. All right. Now, the next problem. This one is a little bit tougher because you haven't learned how to solve problems like this. This is a process known as multiplying polynomials. So, and this more commonly known as FOIL. It's a very easy process. So what most people do is they see x plus 7 squared, and they say, well, that's going to equal x squared plus 49. That's way wrong. You cannot do that. Okay? This is really saying is x plus 7 squared. You have to write this out in what's known as expanded form, and that's x plus 7 times x plus 7. Okay? So if I have that, what I'm going to do is what's essentially distributive property twice. Okay? So in this case, what I would do is I would say, well, I'm going to cover up the 7 for a second. I'm going to cover this up for a second, pretend it doesn't exist. All right? And I would do x times x. Well, x times x is x squared. And then I'm going to do x times this 7, right? Because that would be the distributive property. So I'll do, that's giving me 7x. Now I'm going to uncover this 7 for a second. All right? And I'm going to cover up the x instead and use the distributive property. Well, if I was using the distributive property, it would be 7 times x, so that's plus 7x. And it would be 7 times 7, which is plus 49. And I would get, now let me uncover everything. If I solve this out and combine my like terms, I'm going to get x squared plus 14x plus 49. Alright, and that's pretty much it, because they said, well, if you have x squared plus mx plus 49, they want you to find out what m is. Well, you know x squared, you don't know what, they're asking for the coefficient of x. The coefficient of x is 14. Alright, so your answer is 14 in this case, so that's number 5. Number 6. Number 6 is actually pretty easy, right? We've had a little bit of a problem. We had a few problems that were a little more difficult back to back. Now we get to what's a little bit of an easier problem. All right, so you have to, it says Josh was trying to calculate the mean of his test scores. He did not know what he had scored on each of the first 4 tests, but he knew the sum of his scores was 370. If Josh scored 85 on the 5th test, what's the mean of all 5 test scores? Okay, so in this case, pretty simple, right? Because I don't really need to know, like I know the first 4 added together, right? I know it's blank plus blank plus blank plus blank. And it doesn't have to be the same number, it could be different numbers actually. So it's let's say question mark plus star plus circle plus triangle. And these all represent test scores, but they all add up to 370. Well, they say on the 5th test score, the 5th, so I have question mark plus star plus circle. I should probably not choose a circle, right? Because that looks like a 0. Let's do squiggly lines plus squiggly lines plus triangle plus 85. Well, that's going to equal, well, I know all of these 4 together equal 370. Well, if all I'm doing is adding 85 to it, I know that 370 plus 85. So that's going to be 5. That's 15. Add the 1. That's 455. Well, they're just telling me to find the average or the mean. So I'm going to take the 5 score, or the 455, and divide it by the 5 scores. It's going to be 9. That's 45. That's 0. That's 5. It's 91. All right, 91 is your final answer. That was a pretty easy one, but just gets, if you got it wrong, it could be just a simple misunderstanding or math error. Rectangle area. So number 7, the rectangle has an area of 110 inches. If the length and the width of a rectangle are measured in whole inches, what is the least possible perimeter? Alright, so with this, all you're going to do is you're going to see, well, if I have rectangle and like the area is 110, what's the least possible perimeter? Well, I want to get numbers are going to add up to be very small. Now, suppose I had like 110 and 1. Well, you have to remember, a rectangle has 4 sides. This is going to give me a huge number, and that's not what I want. So what you're going to notice is the closer the numbers are together, the smaller the perimeter is going to be. So let's find the 2 closest numbers together. All right. Now, that's 10 and 11. All right. If I add these together, that's going to give me a reasonably small number. So essentially what I want to do, if I'm trying to keep the perimeter close, all right, and I'm given the area, if I'm trying to keep the perimeter small and I'm given the area, what I'm going to do is try to keep the numbers relatively small. So I have 11 plus 11 plus 10 plus 10, and my least possible perimeter becomes 42. Now, if I was trying to get a larger perimeter, I would use the number that are furthest apart. Okay. Number 8. Number 8. Pretty simple. All right. But kind of tricky. It's a simple problem if you take the time to think about it. The question says a cool potato is placed in a hot 350-degree oven for 1 hour. Which graph best represents what happens to the temperature of the potato as it cooks during the hour? Okay, so now the first thing you need to do is understand that when you're putting something in an oven, it starts, like the oven doesn't start at 350 degrees. So it doesn't start at 350. It might start closer to room temperature. All right, it starts at room temperature. All right, so you can immediately eliminate B and C. Okay. And remember, at 350 degrees, when you're dealing with an oven, it's going to stay at 350 degrees. If you want to cook something at 350 degrees, you don't want it to keep going up. So you don't want something that goes like this, because if it goes past 350, then there's an issue, right? And that's kind of what happened, right? That means there's something wrong with your oven. So it's not the last one, only leaving A, which makes a lot of sense because in this case, it's starting at around room temperature, goes up a bit, and at 350, you see it kind of levels off. It goes up a little bit, but that's kind of what you see with regards to the pattern. So your answer is A. A little tricky, but overall, pretty simple question. Number 9, similar figures. Okay, they tell you that these 2 triangles are similar. So what you need to know is that if any shapes are similar, then they're proportional. Now with proportions, you want to keep things consistent. This is the big triangle, this is the small triangle. I always like to go big to small, goes big to small. Okay? So in this case, what you have is the big triangle has 3 halves x. 3 halves x. Okay? And that's on a corresponding side right here, which is this x. Okay? Now big again, which would be question mark, and 4. Now people get a little lost over here because there's variables, there's 2 variables, and then there's a question, there's a variable and there's also a question mark. This should not scare you. Let me do something really quickly and put this in a better form. This should not scare you, because you know you're allowed to simplify ahead of time. And even if you don't realize it, you can simplify it later. You can cross simplify eventually. First thing is, so if you see it, you can immediately get rid of these x's. If you don't see it, it's fine. Alright, so let's cross multiply and divide. So I have 3 over 2x times 4 over x. Alright, is equal to question mark. Well, these x's cancel out. And you could have seen that here earlier. You could have seen that right here. These x's canceling out. You could have crossed them out earlier if you would have liked, or you could cross them out later. But eventually you're going to have to simplify to help yourself. So now these x's are gone. And then you just have 3 halves times 4 over 1. This cancels. I'm not cross multiplying, I'm cross simplifying, and I'm getting 6. Question mark is equal to 6 as my final answer with that problem. Okay. Number 10. Not too shabby of a problem, pretty simple here. All right, my advice here is to take what you can get in terms of simplifying. You know, some people did go out and immediately distribute, but I would just, you can't really distribute without solving in here first, so I wouldn't worry about that. I would simplify by taking these out, and this will be 3. So what you really have is, this is a 1, so you have 1 times 3 squared plus 3, and you have 3 and 3 plus 9. So you have, so then you just solve that. You can't really distribute until this is solved, because you have to take care of what's inside the parentheses, right? And you can't distribute that, but it's a 1, so it doesn't really matter. So you have 1, and you have 9 plus 3, and you have 3 and 3 plus 9. Some people will say, oh, I can cross this out and cross that out. I can't cross these out because there's a plus sign in the middle. I can't do that. All right, so I have this. I have 1 times 12, which is just 12, and I have 3 times 12. Okay, so then I have 12 over 36, which is just 1/3. All right, that one was simple enough. Moving on, 11. This one is probably the easiest question on there, but it only is easy if you can understand the graph itself. The graph shows a distance Jane was from home as a function of time during a walk. Right, at one point in the walk, Jane stopped for several minutes and waited for her friend. Right, how far was Jane from her home when she stopped and waited for her friend? Well, now what's going to happen? Let's think about it. When you wait, all right, that means your distance is not going to change. If your distance, there's only at one place where your distance doesn't change. Remember, this here, this side, if it's going up or down or anything, that's a distance. Time is on your x-axis, distance is on your y-axis. The only time the distance does not move is right here. All right, the time moves, the time still goes by, because time doesn't stand still, but the distance does stay still, and that happens. All right, I didn't write in a number, at 0.25 miles from home. Okay. Number 12. Number 12 is question about mean, median, and mode. Okay. Essentially you have 20 students. The mean was 75. Median changes mode and range. Now, and they say if Mrs. Garrett, she adds 6 points to everyone's test, which one is affected the least? Okay, well, this one, if you're not sure, what you would do is you would go through and just try it with smaller numbers, okay? If I increase, like, think about it logically. If I increase, like, if I have 3, 4, and 5, or actually let's take numbers that will go in evenly. If I have 3, 6, and 9, if I increase the each by 3, all right, if I increase all of them by 3, and this is 6, 9, and 12, isn't the mean going to change? The average is going to go up, right? Because it's just simple logic. If I add these 3 together and divide by 3, and I add these 3, if I add these 3 together and add by 3, divide by 3, and I add these 3 together and divide by 3, then the second one's going to be greater. So it's not mean. Now median, well, let's look at the same set. 3, 6, 9. Well, the median is the number in the middle, okay? 6 versus 9, well, it definitely went up, right? Now, this is not directly doing with this problem, but what I'm doing is I'm substituting to make the problem easier for myself. Now, let's look here. The mode. All right? In this case, there's no mode, but let's suppose there was another number here. Suppose it was 3, 6, 9, and then another 9, and there was another 12. Or, right, because I added 3. Now, if I added 3 to each of these, doesn't the mode go up? Yes, because it went from 9 in the first one to 12 in the second one. All right? So it's not mode. Now, the range, in this case, let's look at it. If I'm adding 3 to everything here, the range is 9 minus 3, which is 6. And the here is 12 minus 6, which is 6. So the range doesn't even change at all. All right? So the range is a thing that doesn't change at all, and that's, so just a quick rule to know for the future is if your numbers go up, if every number goes up by the same amount, the range will not change. All right? Or if it goes down by the same amount, the range will not change. It will affect the mean, median, and mode though. Number 13. Now when I said number 11 was easy, number 13 is even easier. All right, it just looks like it's difficult because they use words like number cues instead of dice. All right, Jim and Maud are playing a game using number cubes. Each player rolls 2 number cubes numbered 1 through 6, and the sum of the numbers is recorded. All right, Jim receives 1 point if his sum is a 6. Maud receives a point if her sum is a 6 or 4. All right, who has a greater probability of receiving a point? Well, Jim receives a point if his sum is 6. Maud receives a point if the sum is 6 or 4. Well, clearly, Maud has a greater probability. Because she has 2 options versus Jim having 1 option, and they have the same option. So there's not really much to explain on this one. Number 14. 14 is one that always gets people. So I'm going to take some time to explain this one. I drew out the graph. This one says a scientist collects data. He determines both the mean of the data and the median of the data are equal to 7, and the data are symmetric about this value. He starts to create the bar graph shown, but does not finish the graph. Okay, let's look at this. So this, they give me some, does not finish the graph, and then it says if the range of the data is 8 and the maximum value of the data is 11, how many data points fall above the value 7? So how many fall above here? Okay, so the big thing is that it's symmetric. These 3 pieces of information are really important, but the big one is that it's symmetric. I already drew in what information they gave you. So if it's symmetric, I'm going to make it look the same. I'm going to do it in a different color. Rather than black, I'm going to use, let's go with red. All right, so at 4, it's at, at 8, it's going to be at 7, just to match, right? At 9, it's going to be at 4. Right, so 10 corresponds with this 4 here, so that's going to be 2. And this 11 corresponds with this 3 here, it's going to be 1. Now I have a symmetric graph. I'm going to say, now the other thing is to determine, are there any, they told me the maximum value is 11, so I know it can't go above 11, all right? But I know, so if that's the case, and they also told me that the range is 3, so I know 11 minus, oh sorry, the range is 8, so 11 minus 3 is 8, so I know that 3 has to be my bottom number, okay? 11 minus 3 equals 8, that is the range, so I know that there's no 2 or 1 or 12, okay? So let's see, how many numbers are greater than 7? Well, there are 7 right here. There are 4 here, right? There are 2 here. There's 1 here. So 7 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1, I believe, gives you 14, because you have 7 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1. 14. Your answer is 14. Okay. Number 15, last one we're going to go over. Oh, nice. Y is equal to 2x squared plus 1 for negative 2 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 1. So in this case, what they're saying is you have 5 options, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1. Or sorry, 4 options. Okay? And which one is going to give you the biggest value? You should immediately see which is going to give you the biggest value, because it's an addition problem, so that should give you a heads up. But also, you should be able to see that it's squared, so that means a negative and a negative is going to give me a positive value here. But just in case you don't see it, you can start plugging in numbers, these 4 numbers, to help you decide. But I wouldn't plug in all of them. You know it either has to be 1 or negative 2, because they're on opposite ends of the spectrum here. So we have, I mean, in my mind it's pretty obvious that it's negative 2, but let's just plug it in. So you have 2, and you have x squared. Remember, you always want to put the value in parentheses. So right now, sorry, 2x squared plus 1. So I'm going to do 2 and then negative 2 squared plus 1. Right? A negative and a negative is going to give me a positive. I have to use my exponents first. So this is 4 times 2 plus 1. That's going to give me 9. Alright, if I plug in the other value, which is 2x squared plus 1, 2 times 1 squared plus 1, it's going to be 1, that's 2, 3 plus 1 equals, or sorry, 2 plus 1 equals 3. 9, clearly the higher value. 9 is my option there, and you kind of go from there. If you're not sure, you can plug in all 4. It's just you have limited time. Alright, that's questions 1 through 15. I will go back at some point to review. There was one question I think I messed up on. I think there was 7 or 8. I don't remember which, but I'll go over that relatively soon. Thanks.